Hello, art historians. Here we are again, and we're going to look at some interesting and amazing art from ancient Rome. And so we're going to start with, I'm just going to show you this. This is one of the most famous Roman statues. And what's interesting is that the wolf is from the 5th century BCE, and then the babies are added during the Renaissance. But this is the story of Romulus and Remus, who were twins that were raised by a wolf, a she-wolf, who then established Rome they established a city on the 7 hills of Rome. So this is, if you ever see the wolf or stuff, things like that, it's imagery that echoes this story. We're going to start here with the house of the Vetti. I would recommend to you that there is an amazing video on Khan Academy called Rome Reborn, video reconstruction. It's really excellent. It's about 12 minutes, and it's a really excellent video for getting an idea of what importance there is in the concept of digging up Pompeii and how the ruins in Pompeii really taught art historians and archaeologists a great deal about the Roman Empire. So the House of the Vetti is a home in Pompeii. And there's a lot that's here. So it's Imperial Rome. It's the early part of the Roman Empire. We're looking at the 2nd century BCE when it is first constructed. Then there was an earthquake, and the Vetti brothers purchased the house in 62 CE, the Common Era, 62. And they got it for a really good price because there had been earthquake damage. So what's interesting about what we have here is a reconstruction that allows us to see sort of some of the work that they did. And also it provides really good information for us. So there was a huge earthquake in Pompeii in 62. That allows the Vetti brothers to buy this home. They start doing the reconstructions on it. They start doing the work on it. It's almost completely finished when Mount Vesuvius erupts in 79 CE and literally covers all of Pompeii in ash. And it seals it in so that when these ruins are discovered, they are in fantastic condition. All of the frescoes are in great condition. Many of the statues are in wonderful condition. The home itself is very well preserved. And we get really a great look into what a standard domus, D-O-M-U-S, or house is like. These men were brothers, and this is where they ran their business out of. They were merchants, and they would have run their business out of their home. Because we were in a patron-client society, the patron, the merchant, would receive the clients at their home. And the homes were built for exactly that. So we're going to look at sort of the floor plan here, which is your first image. So when you look here, vestibulum, this is the entrance. This is where we get our modern word vestibule. Okay, we pass through this entrance here at the fauces. We don't need to worry about that. And we go here to the atrium. And in the atrium, there's a very small pool, and it's open to the ceiling. And it creates a really beautiful area to entertain. Okay, we pass through here, and we see some of these smaller rooms that open onto the atrium where there might have had basically an office where they would have had some samples of their business. They would have kept their books, their monetary records. And then you pass here through this open area into the garden. And it's called a peristyle garden. And it has these really cool it's an open courtyard that has fountains and statuary and little rooms. And, that's what we're looking. These little rooms here are called cubicula, like cubicle, Cubicula, and they're small rooms that would have offered some sort of place to meet or something like that. And this area, this peristyle garden would have allowed, again, if we're meeting with clients here, if we were meeting with more than one client, we could come out here. One brother could be meeting with clients in the atrium. The other brother could be meeting with clients out here in the garden. So this is sort of the formal how we deal with our clients. And you'll notice that there are two dining rooms. This is a dining room where, based on its proximity to the atrium and the peristyle and the cubicula here, we assume that this is probably a dining room where they would have helped their clients, as opposed to this dining room, which is closer to the family spaces, which is probably where it would have been the family dining room. We go here, there's a really beautiful painted room, and we're going to look at that in a minute, and we'll come back to that. This is another small courtyard that's right here. Lots of open space to the sky. It lets light in. This is a bedroom. This is probably another bedroom. And this is the kitchen. Okay. And so this is why this is probably the family dining room, because of its proximity to the kitchen. This one is very far from the kitchen and probably where they would have entertained. So you're looking at a home that allows for the ability to entertain your guests, or more likely your clients. We're looking at very small entrances here because the houses would have been lined up sort of one after the other, where the shops you would have been able to go into the shops. Okay, so we're gonna oh, and you'll notice that there are very few windows. There's some small openings here, very few windows. And that's because this whole area is open to the sky, this whole area is open to the sky, and this whole area is open to the sky. We don't really do a lot of windows, and it's because the light comes in from the atrium and the peristyle garden. Okay, so we're gonna go to the next scene, and this is what it looks like today. So you'll see these very small windows, that the clear story window that we talked about when we did ancient Egypt. And we see the atrium entrance here. And so this atrium entrance would have allowed for water to come down through the mouths of these little animals and into this pool here. So there are these little fonts, and this would have been a catch basin. It would have caught fresh water for drinking and things like that, for drinking and cooking, because it would have just been rainwater. And it's open to the sky so that you get lots of light in here, and you can see from the front door into the two cubiculums and straight through to the peristyle garden, where you can see the columns. And so it allows for a really beautiful reception area. And you also can see that it's very symmetrical, right? You come down here and there's pretty much, an entrance here and an entrance there, a column here and a column there, a column here and a column there. It gives you a really beautiful, what's called axial symmetry. It's the same on one side as it is on the other side. And so finding these ruins allowed us to understand some of the descriptions. We had Vitruvius's canon of description of buildings. But this really allowed us to have really exact life examples, as opposed to just his descriptions. What we do know is that the time that Vesuvius erupted in 79, there were still a couple of rooms that were under construction. And so there were old layers and new layers when they were discovered. And people always question, well, why, why, if there was this terrible earthquake that destroyed stuff, did you rebuild? Well, what are you going to do? Not have any place to live? This is where your business is. And then other people question, why, if Vesuvius erupted, did Naples grow up? There's 3 million people in the shadow of Vesuvius, and Vesuvius is still an active volcano. And so the question becomes, why don't people move? And the answer is because this is where your life is. And so people just rebuild. It's the same thing, that people asked after Katrina, that people ask in California. You are hesitant to move away from everything that you know. And you assume once it's happened, it's not going to happen again. Another good question is, when do you stop digging? There's digging that took place at Pompeii, and they've stopped excavating because they've basically come up to the edge of the city of Naples. At Pompeii, and they're hesitant to continue to dig there, because if they wanted to excavate more of ancient Pompeii, they would have to relocate or displace modern day citizens of Naples, and they're not willing to do that. And so there's lots of questions about things like that. Now, we're going to move forward into, this is a recreation of what this home would have looked like. There would have been a fountain here that would have allowed them to get fresh drinking water. Here's the depiction of them entertaining their clients. We have these beautiful columns here with wonderful paintings at the bottom, and we can see that there's plaster on the walls and straight through to the other thing. Your theme here is a house with gardens, and there will also be some other themes that we could probably talk about when we do this piece in class. Then we move forward. So you have 3 images: the floor plan, the interior original, like the actual interior piece, not the reconstruction, and this wall. And this wall is from the triclinium, which we decided was we learned about this when we did the Temple of Minerva and the Etruscans, that the triclinium is the dining room. So this is the dining room. And what's interesting is we talked about the fact that there are no windows here, but what we do have is this painting technique called trompe-l'oeil. And that's how you pronounce this, trompe-l'oeil. And trompe-l'oeil painting is painting that tricks the eye. This is painted to look like a window, and it's painted to look like you can look out and see this through the window. That's painted to look like a window, and that's painted to look like a window. This is painted to look like there's like a little bit of a wood molding here with a pretty picture on it. But this is all painted directly onto the wall. There are no columns here. There's not actually a railing here. This is all painted directly onto the wall, and it's called trompe-l'oeil. It's to fool the eye. So you see here some stories about Greek heroes. You see a Bacchus, a Bacchanalian festival where there's just a crazy party. You see the architecture through the window. And it's an imaginary landscape in the distance. It's not a real landscape. It functions like a window in that it gives you something to look at. But again, we got our light from the peristyle garden and from the atrium. I'm so sorry. My brain just had a hiccup. And so we have these beautiful images here from the House of the Vetti because they were preserved by the ash of Pompeii, by the ash of Mount Vesuvius. Now, what you're looking at is a very, very important art term, fresco. And it is basically the concept of painting onto plaster in a way that creates a chemical reaction that makes the paint basically bond to the wall so that you don't really end up with paint that flakes off. It's such an important concept in the history of art that I'm going to show you it's a 7-minute video on how fresco works. I will show this to you. I will show this in class. Fresco is one of the most important concepts in art because it's something that dates back to the ancient Greeks. Ancient Greeks did fresco, and we're still using fresco today. Diego Rivera, who is a Mexican muralist, he painted in fresco. So we're talking fresco from about 800, 1000 BCE, even earlier, actually, all the way up through modern era. So we're going to look at this video on what fresco is and how fresco really is a scientific and mathematical sort of important investigation. So here we go, fresco.
Support provided by the Glick Fund, a CICF fund focused on inspiring philanthropy. Additional support provided by the Crystal DeHaan Family Foundation in honor of the children and families of Crystal House. Fresco painting using wet plaster dates back to 1500 BC and the island of Crete in Greece. Of course, fresco can be seen around ancient Greece as well, often within tombs depicting scenes of everyday life. There are even scenes of a couple dudes just reclining at a banquet. However, where we really see some incredible examples is in the ancient city of Pompeii. In 79 AD, Pompeii was struck by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which completely buried the city in volcanic ash. To our advantage, definitely not to the people of Pompeii, much of this city was preserved. Check out these amazing fresco paintings. Fresco painting was definitely the wallpaper of the day, so to speak. They included scenes from everyday life, which told stories of daily life, including everything from being a vendor to a competition between Pompeii and a rival town. Sort of a West Side Story, Sharks versus Jets thing. Apparently, things got pretty bloody, which tends to happen when knives and swords get involved. Fast forward to the 2nd and 3rd century AD in Rome, where fresco painting makes its way into the wells and vaults of the underground catacombs, with biblical scenes on the limestone walls. Fast forward even further to the 13th century, where we see fresco work exploding. Of course, once painters like Raphael and Michelangelo got a hold of the style, it was the go-to technique. Now that you know the basic history, let's explore what is happening within the chemistry during the process of fresco painting. Let's break down what we are going to need to make this wet plaster mixture.
And this is really important because when we think about it, when you're looking at it, one of the main ingredients in making fresco is volcanic ash. And because Pompeii is in the shadow of Vesuvius, there was volcanic ash before Vesuvius from previous eruptions. So fresco usually appears where there are volcanoes.
First is limestone. Limestone is a very common rock found in shallow, calm, warm marine waters. It has a simple composition consisting of 1 calcium atom and 1 carbon atom, and 3 oxygen atoms. To prepare the limestone for plaster, we must calcify the limestone first, which means heating it to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 3 times the temperature your oven at home can reach. This process of adding heat breaks down the calcium carbonate into calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Releasing all this CO2 in the air isn't exactly environmentally friendly. The calcium oxide we create from the limestone is called quicklime. This quicklime, which consists of only 1 calcium atom and 1 oxygen atom, is now a rather toxic powder of refined limestone. In fact, this lime is now an alkali. An alkali is a basic ionic salt or earth metal that dissolves in water. Since this quicklime does have a pH greater than 7, it can cause a chemical burn on exposed skin. Keep this in mind as you imagine Michelangelo and his team working daily with this chemical 60 feet off the ground. Dangerous? You better believe it. Second ingredient is water, or H2O. What happens next is fascinating. When we take lime and add H2O, the two react chemically, creating tremendous amounts of heat. In fact, tremendous amounts as in enough to boil water. Once you add the calcium oxide or quicklime to water, it is now calcium hydroxide or slate lime. The third ingredient is sand. Any idea why they would add sand? You would think it would absorb the water, right? Not exactly. Sand, which is basically microscopic particles of shells, fish bones, and rocks, won't absorb water. But the space created between these particles can most definitely hold water and air. Adding sand created space within the plaster mixture, allowing the necessary carbon dioxide to creep in and quicken the creation of calcium carbonate. But you have to be really careful how much sand and water you add to the plaster mix. At the beginning, Team Michelangelo was adding too much water, which wasn't allowing the plaster to dry quickly enough. This caused mold to form very quickly. Mold on a painting? Yeah, that's not so good. Michelangelo, on the other hand, had an ingenious idea. Check this out. In order to speed up the drying time of the plaster and to attain the smoothest surface to paint on, Michelangelo added ground volcanic ash instead of sand. This idea had been used within those ancient Roman catacombs we just talked about. And guess where he got this ash from? Remember Pompeii? Yep, this volcanic ash came from Mount Vesuvius, the same volcanic ash that destroyed the city. As the slaked lime within the plaster mixture continues to heat up, it reacts to the carbon dioxide in the air. Here's what amazes me. As this carbon dioxide is reintroduced into the slaked lime, the lime begins to harden and creates these crystals. These crystals are calcium carbonate, or CaCO3. Does that look familiar? It should. It's limestone. Yep, you guessed it. We have come full circle back to the original molecular structure we started with. We're back to limestone. Before adding paint, you would typically need to add 2 layers of plaster called the arriccio. After the arriccio layer dries, the final intonaco layer, or smooth layer, is added. Of course, Michelangelo and the other fresco painters had to paint quickly on this wet plaster layer before it turned back into limestone.
That's super important, this idea that you have to paint on it when it's wet, because that painting on it when it's wet allows the pigment to bond with the drying limestone, so that when it dries, the pigment is not on top of the limestone, it's part of the limestone.
As the paint sinks into the quickly drying intonaco layer, the pigment is now being blended into the calcium carbonate, or limestone. Now that the pigment is fused into the limestone layer, it is very stable and can survive for centuries. I don't know about you, but I had no idea just how much science was involved in fresco painting. Pretty amazing, right?
All right, my friends, that's all we're going to do today. We're just going to do the House of the Vetti and frescoes today, and I will see you again next time.